December 24th, 1880, Paris. Within the narrow streets of Montparnasse, the rhythmic clang of metal echoed from a modest workshop illuminated by gaslight. Edgar William Brandt, the son of an iron merchant, moved with the meticulous grace of an artist shaping form from fire. His early creations were not instruments of destruction, but elegant iron balustrades, ornate gates, and intricate chandeliers admired across the salons of pre-war France. Brandt's craftsmanship combined mathematical symmetry with artistic intuition, bridging beauty and precision long before war would twist his genius toward a darker purpose. When August 1914 plunged Europe into catastrophe, France's artistic sun turned his mind toward survival. Brandt joined the Ministry of Armament, observing the misery of infantrymen trapped in trenches where rifles and grenades proved futile against distant machine guns. It was here, amid the mud and thunder of Verdun, that Brandt's imagination encountered necessity. Soldiers required a weapon portable enough to accompany them, yet capable of striking targets hidden beyond their line of sight. His silversmith's understanding of balance and his engineer's grasp of geometry fused into a single idea, a smoothbore tube capable of delivering explosive precision through arcs of silent death. By 1915, Brandt's experimental mortars appeared along French front lines, lightweight yet devastating in their simplicity. He refined each detail, the obturation grooves for gas sealing, the fin-stabilized shells for trajectory control, and the firing mechanism designed for rapid deployment under fire. His invention transformed the battlefield's language, replacing blind bombardment with targeted support guided by mathematics and muscle memory. The infantryman, once defenseless within craters, now possessed indirect firepower rivaling artillery in miniature form. After the armistice, while Europe rebuilt its shattered cities, Brandt refined his concepts further, driven not by glory, but perfection. His 1925 patent for the aerodynamic mortar bomb would become the cornerstone of modern infantry warfare. Unaware that his elegant equations would echo far beyond Europe's fields, Brandt continued crafting both beauty and destruction with equal devotion. The silversmith who once shaped iron for cathedrals now forged blueprints destined to shape empires. Across the Atlantic, military observers studied his work quietly, recognizing within his delicate French craftsmanship the foundation for a weapon that would someday alter the course of the Pacific War forever. Through the 1920s, Edgar Brandt's laboratory in Paris became a crucible where artistry met industrial innovation beneath the flicker of acetylene lamps. He approached weapon design not as destruction, but as geometry in motion, each curve of steel serving purpose beyond ornament. His experiments refined the delicate equilibrium between weight, recoil, and range, ultimately producing a weapon so balanced that a single soldier could deploy it within seconds. The 60mm mortar, emerging from these experiments, embodied simplicity refined through relentless precision, destined to outlive the doctrines that first inspired it. Brandt's design philosophy rejected unnecessary complexity, favoring standardized components machined for reliability under mud, heat, and shock. The smoothbore barrel, machined from seamless steel tubing, allowed consistent chamber pressures and predictable trajectories under varying conditions. Its bipod mount absorbed recoil while maintaining accuracy, enabling trained crews to sustain rapid fire without mechanical fatigue. The shell itself, a fin-stabilized cylinder of cast steel, carried an explosive charge proportioned to fragment evenly upon detonation, ensuring lethality across compact perimeters. This careful orchestration of geometry, metallurgy, and field pragmatism made the 60mm concept revolutionary in both purpose and execution. By 1925, Brandt's patents described a system scalable across calibers, adaptable for infantry, mountain, or airborne units. Military observers across Europe recognized the design's significance immediately, purchasing production licenses for experimentation and modification. France adopted it as the Mortier de 60mm Model 1925, a compact support weapon ideal for colonial expeditions where mobility outweighed firepower. The weapon's impact extended beyond its mechanical efficiency. It reshaped tactical thinking by giving small infantry units autonomy once reserved for artillery batteries. Battles once dictated by fixed guns and distant orders now responded to decentralized firepower controlled directly by field commanders. Foreign delegations visiting Brandt's workshop often remarked upon his meticulous demonstrations, where he adjusted angles with a jeweler's precision before striking the firing pin with measured calm. He never raised his voice, treating explosions as affirmations of craftsmanship rather than destruction. Observers left Paris carrying blueprints destined for reproduction under countless national markings, each retaining the elegant French foundation. The 60mm mortar, born from an artist's geometry, began its quiet migration toward global adoption, preparing unknowingly for a future defined not by Europe's mud, but by Pacific jungles echoing with the fury of modern war. By the late 1930s, the U.S. Army's Ordnance Department faced an undeniable tactical void, dividing hand grenades from heavy mortars. American infantry units possessed either weapons too light for sustained engagement or artillery too cumbersome for rapid deployment under fire. Reports from European observers studying French weaponry pointed consistently toward one innovation capable of bridging this divide: Edgar Brandt's 60mm mortar. The War Department's Board of Infantry reviewed French demonstration footage showing single gunners delivering precise, high-angle fire against simulated targets, prompting immediate consideration for domestic adaptation. In 1938, 8 French-built prototypes arrived at Watervliet Arsenal in New York, a facility whose furnaces had served American wars since the early 19th century. Inside its cavernous workshops, engineers examined Brandt's creation with reverence, bordering on astonishment. Every component bore evidence of artistic precision: threaded joints polished to near-mirror finish, seamless barrel interior honed by decades of metallurgical refinement. Yet for American mass production, perfection demanded alteration. Standardized threading replaced metric fittings, alloy compositions adjusted for domestic steel availability, and mounting assemblies re-engineered for industrial simplicity. The resulting transformation produced a uniquely American variant, lighter, sturdier, and tailored for the logistical rhythms of global warfare. Designated the Mortar 60mm M2, this new weapon embodied the synthesis of French artistry and American pragmatism. It weighed under 40 pounds complete, allowing rapid assembly even under hostile conditions. Its firing pin and trigger mechanism were modified for safety, enabling controlled single-shot operation or sustained fire through practiced rhythm. The M49 shell, fitted with a percussion fuse, delivered lethal fragmentation within 30 yards of impact while maintaining stable trajectory across 600 yards of range. Each improvement reflected the marriage of industrial efficiency and battlefield necessity, ensuring durability across climates from Saharan deserts to Pacific jungles. Field trials at Aberdeen Proving Ground confirmed the weapon's extraordinary reliability. Within minutes, trained crews established firing positions, delivered indirect fire with mathematical precision, and relocated before counterattack detection. Ordnance evaluators noted the M2's adaptability across offensive and defensive operations, predicting its central role in future amphibious campaigns. Production orders followed swiftly, propelling the new mortar into mass manufacture just as the world edged toward total conflict. Unbeknownst to its creators, this redesigned French invention would soon decide the fate of battles thousands of miles from the workshops where its blueprints had first drawn breath. By the summer of 1942, as the Pacific burned beneath the expanding shadow of Japanese conquest, America's new 60mm M2 mortar reached the front lines. Crates marked Watervliet Arsenal arrived at staging areas across New Caledonia and Espiritu Santo, where Marine logisticians distributed them to fresh infantry regiments preparing for an island campaign few understood. The weapon, untested beyond controlled ranges, would soon define the tempo of jungle warfare through precision unseen in prior conflicts. Its arrival coincided with a desperate hour, America's first major offensive against Imperial Japan. When the 1st Marine Division landed on Guadalcanal in August 1942, Henderson Field remained little more than a scar of packed coral under continuous rain. Supply shortages, disease, and isolation plagued the defenders while Japanese naval bombardments turned night into firestorms. Within these conditions, the M2 mortar proved its worth almost immediately. Marines discovered that its lightweight bipod and compact barrel allowed swift repositioning through dense undergrowth, granting flexibility impossible with heavier crew-served weapons. Ammunition carriers learned to improvise waterproof wrapping from ration tins and canvas, preserving shells despite the island's relentless humidity. Each new firing position transformed clearing and ridge into potential fortress. Under Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty Puller's command, mortar sections from the 7th Marines integrated seamlessly with rifle companies, forming a symbiotic network of fire support. Their task was simple, yet essential: deny movement across trails feeding Japanese reinforcements toward Henderson Field. By October, these teams had mastered the weapon's rhythm, adjusting elevation by touch, judging range through instinct shaped by repetition rather than instruments. Each projectile fired arced invisibly above palm canopies before bursting into metallic rain that shredded charging infantry formations. For the first time, small units possessed the capacity to halt massed assaults through mathematics rather than manpower. Reports forwarded to Pacific Fleet headquarters emphasized the M2's reliability, despite primitive maintenance. Its fin-stabilized shells maintained consistent accuracy even after hundreds of rounds, while its steel components resisted corrosion better than expected. Observers noted morale rising among troops who finally possessed controllable power capable of matching Japan's ferocity. The mortar, once a technical curiosity from Europe, had become the beating heart of jungle defense, awaiting the ultimate test history would soon deliver upon Guadalcanal's blood-soaked ridges. On October 25, 1942, Henderson Field lay shrouded beneath the heavy stillness that often precedes calamity. The tropical dusk settled thickly over coconut groves and half-flooded foxholes carved into the island's clay. Across the southern perimeter, men from the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, and the 164th Infantry Regiment crouched silently within their positions. They listened to the distant rumble of artillery from Japanese guns hidden beyond the Matanikau River and felt the tremors pulsing through the damp earth beneath their boots. No birds sang, no wind stirred the palms, only the muffled clatter of tools as mortar crews adjusted their firing stakes one final time before darkness consumed the field entirely. Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty Puller walked along the defensive line carrying a folded map, his voice low but steady. He reminded his officers that Lieutenant General Masao Maruyama's 2nd Division was closing in, 3,000 men advancing through the jungle, preparing to retake Henderson Field by direct assault. Puller understood what that meant. There would be no subtle infiltration or silent attack tonight, only the kind of reckless fury the Marines had learned to call a Banzai Charge. The order was simple: hold the line until dawn, no matter the cost. Within the weapons platoons, mortar crews performed their ritual of preparation with the precision of seasoned artisans. Each M2 mortar was disassembled, cleaned, and reassembled under red-filtered lanterns to ensure nothing failed once the battle began. Ammunition bearers stacked crates of 60mm rounds within arm's reach, cutting open fuse covers and aligning them for rapid access. Gunner Corporal James Finnegan checked the elevation bubbles, while Loader Private Anthony Bianchi whispered the firing sequence like a prayer. They had fired hundreds of rounds during training, yet none carried the weight of what awaited them beyond that black jungle wall. At 8:15 p.m., the first reports arrived of movement within the thickets, faint at first, but growing louder, rhythmic, almost ceremonial. Japanese officers signaled silently with flashlights shrouded in red cloth, guiding their battalions into formation for the assault. The Marines waited, hearts steady beneath helmets slick with sweat and rain. Somewhere beyond the tree line, 3,000 voices inhaled together, preparing to unleash the storm destined to test every lesson born from Edgar Brandt's vision of controlled firepower. At 10:25 p.m., the first rifle cracks shattered the humid darkness over Henderson Field, followed almost instantly by a rising tide of screams. 3,000 Japanese soldiers of Lieutenant General Masao Maruyama's 2nd Division surged from the jungle, bayonets glinting under brief flares of muzzle flash, their cries of "Tenno Heika Banzai" echoing through the drenched air like thunder rolling over iron. The Marines had barely a heartbeat to respond before the entire southern perimeter dissolved into chaos, flame, and motion. Sergeant Walter Harris of the weapons platoon dropped to one knee beside his M2 mortar, his voice steady despite the cacophony that surrounded him. "Fire for effect," he shouted, and the first 60mm round slid down the smooth steel tube, clanging faintly before erupting into the night sky. The shell arced high, its burning tail tracing a thin line against the clouds before detonating in a blossom of white fire above the charging wave. The concussion rolled outward, shredding jungle leaves and hurling men into the mud. In seconds, dozens of mortars joined the symphony. Henderson Field became a furnace of controlled destruction as the 60mm teams worked by instinct and muscle memory, each crew maintaining the rhythm of loading, firing, adjusting, and firing again. Every shell struck within the narrow gap between the tree line and the front trench, raining fragmentation into the advancing ranks. Japanese soldiers pressed forward undeterred, stepping over their fallen comrades, their determination fed by the unyielding code of the Emperor's army. Puller's voice came through the command line, calm, precise, and unbroken. He ordered illumination rounds launched over the jungle's edge, transforming the night into a ghastly theater of fire and shadow. Beneath the flickering glow, Marines fired carbines and machine guns until barrels glowed red, yet it was the mortars that turned the tide. Each burst carved rifts through the assault columns, cutting down officers, silencing buglers, and leaving the survivors staggering through smoke thick enough to taste. By midnight, the battlefield was a maelstrom of shattered bodies, broken branches, and burning palm trunks. Still, the mortar crews fought relentlessly, adjusting fire coordinates by shouted distances and burning their palms on overheated tubes. The smell of cordite mingled with rain and blood, rising in waves that coated every breath. For the first time, the legendary ferocity of the Banzai Charge faltered, not through brute strength, but through precision, discipline, and the unerring mathematics of modern war. By 2:15 a.m., the tropical rain began to fall in thick curtains, hissing against the burning palm trunks and the red-hot mortar tubes. The storm blurred the battlefield into streaks of shadow and flame. Yet the Marines held their line, drenched to the bone, but unyielding as the second wave emerged from the jungle gloom. Lieutenant John Dunbar wiped mud from his eyes, calling fire adjustments to the M2 crews crouched beside their soaked ammunition crates, their fingers blistered but steady as they prepared the next salvo. Each 60mm mortar barked in rhythm, their recoil thudding like distant drums, their shells arcing invisibly through the downpour before finding the faint movement of enemy silhouettes. The Japanese formations, already disoriented from their failed midnight charge, collided headlong into precisely ranged impact zones. Every explosion tore open the soaked earth, scattering fragments of bamboo, helmets, and shattered rifles, transforming what had once been coordinated assault lines into chaos and confusion beneath the flickering glow of dying flares. Major Kenneth Bailey, overseeing the left flank, ordered the mortar crews to maintain continuous fire for 12 minutes straight, their only pause coming when barrels glowed dull orange from heat. He moved between positions, shouting encouragement, reminding the young gunners that they were holding the gateway to Henderson Field itself, the vital lifeline of the entire Guadalcanal campaign. Around him, the men's faces glistened under rain and sweat, their uniforms torn, their nerves stretched thin yet anchored by pure resolve. Through the storm, the Japanese pressed forward with desperation, climbing over mounds of fallen comrades, carrying grenades tied to sticks, charging machine gun nests with swords raised high. The mortars responded with surgical precision, the deadly arcs timed by instinct rather than instruments, raining destruction upon the advancing columns before they reached the wire. It was not courage that prevailed in those hours, but discipline, the kind born from training, teamwork, and the knowledge that survival depended on mathematics and rhythm. By 3 a.m., the jungle fell eerily silent except for the crackle of fires, and the faint moans of the wounded. The Banzai Charge, once an unstoppable tide, had been shattered by a weapon designed by an artist who understood both beauty and destruction. The Marines stood among smoking craters, rain streaming down their faces, knowing dawn would reveal what endurance had truly cost. At 6:10 a.m., the first pale streaks of dawn spread across Henderson Field, revealing a landscape transformed by violence and rain. Smoke drifted in ribbons over craters filled with muddy water, and palm trees stood like blackened skeletons against the rising light. The air carried a thick metallic scent, the mingling of cordite, fuel, and blood, as Marines moved cautiously among the debris of what had been the fiercest night of their lives. The sound of sporadic rifle fire echoed faintly from the jungle's edge, then faded into the distance as silence took hold. Corpsmen worked without pause, kneeling beside the wounded and marking the fallen with quiet efficiency, their expressions carved from exhaustion and disbelief. Sergeant Harris, whose mortar crew had fired nearly 200 rounds before dawn, stood beside the weapon that had saved his platoon. The once silver tube was now scorched black, pitted with heat scars, and resting in a nest of spent shell casings that glimmered like brass offerings beneath the morning sun. Nearby, a group of Marines gathered around a single helmet lying upright in the mud, rainwater pooling inside it like a mirror reflecting the gray sky above. Across the shattered clearing, Lieutenant Dunbar reported that enemy movement had ceased entirely, confirming what every man already knew. The Japanese 2nd Division's assault had been broken. Scattered bodies lay tangled in the jungle undergrowth, their bayonets glinting faintly in the dawn light, their flags soaked and torn by the storm. The famed Banzai spirit had met its match not through superior numbers or heavier guns, but through precision, coordination, and a weapon born from a silversmith's imagination. Puller walked the line at sunrise, speaking little, his boots sinking into mud thick with spent cartridges. He stopped occasionally to rest a hand on a soldier's shoulder or offer a nod of acknowledgement, gestures that carried more than words ever could. The Marines watched him pass, understanding the meaning behind his silence. It was victory, but not triumph. Around them lay proof that endurance carried its own price, and even the strongest resolve left scars invisible beneath the skin. As the sun rose higher, its golden light swept across the ruined field, catching the smoke and turning it to mist. Henderson Field stood unbroken, its defenders weary yet immortalized by the morning. The living testament to the night precision had conquered chaos. In the months that followed the battle for Henderson Field, the 60mm mortar earned a reverence among infantrymen unmatched by any other weapon. Reports from Guadalcanal circulated through command channels and training manuals, detailing how a handful of coordinated crews had repelled one of the largest Banzai charges ever recorded. The lessons drawn were unmistakable. Mobility, precision, and mathematics could now replace sheer numbers as the deciding factors of ground warfare. What Edgar Brandt had conceived in a Parisian workshop 2 decades earlier had matured into the ultimate embodiment of disciplined firepower. At Camp Pendleton and Quantico, instructors dissected the Guadalcanal engagement, emphasizing that victory no longer depended upon fixed positions or massive artillery. They demonstrated how the M2's light frame, weighing barely 42 pounds, allowed company-level units to respond with devastating accuracy under pressure. Every new recruit learned to feel the rhythm of the weapon, the metallic thud, the echoing descent, and the breathless pause before eruption. Through repetition, they came to understand what the Marines on Guadalcanal had learned in terror and triumph, that mastery of timing was mastery of survival. Meanwhile, military engineers refined the mortar's components, introducing improved base plates and faster loading rounds. Yet the design's essence remained unmistakably Brandt's, a blend of geometry, balance, and simplicity that resisted obsolescence. At Watervliet Arsenal, the craftsmen who had once translated French blueprints into American production drawings now spoke with quiet pride of their weapon's legacy. Every field test, every drill, and every battlefield confirmed that the 60mm mortar had become the infantry's heartbeat. Japanese intelligence eventually obtained fragments of captured M2s and recorded their observations in Tokyo's confidential technical bulletins. Analysts described the weapon as unfathomably efficient, noting its ability to sustain fire with minimal mechanical failure. They marveled at its integration into small unit tactics, an innovation that blended industrial ingenuity with battlefield intuition. The same principles that once defined European artistry now defined modern war. Across the Pacific, surviving veterans of the Guadalcanal campaign carried fragments of that night with them long after the gunfire ceased. Some kept shrapnel fragments as talismans. Others simply remembered the sound, the thump that signaled both destruction and salvation. The 60mm mortar had not just shattered a Banzai Charge. It had rewritten the language of combat, fusing creativity, discipline, and courage into a single act of human invention that reshaped the course of military history. Years after the fires of Guadalcanal had faded into history, the echoes of that October night lingered in memory and steel. Veterans spoke of the battle not as a victory of arms, but as a collision of wills, where invention met fanaticism and precision overcame chaos. The 60mm mortar, once a silversmith's dream forged in the heart of Paris, had become the instrument through which survival was measured and history was rewritten. Its echoes could still be heard in every military doctrine that valued accuracy over aggression, calculation over courage alone. At the Musée de l'Armée in Paris, one of Edgar Brandt's original mortars rested beneath a glass case, its bronze surface polished by time, yet still bearing faint marks of the craftsman's tools. Visitors rarely understood that its design, so simple, so elegant, had shaped the outcome of battles fought thousands of miles away. Brandt himself never saw Guadalcanal, yet his imagination had saved lives on a distant island where art and mathematics merged amid fire and fear. In his design lay the paradox of creation, the artist's gift repurposed for war's cruel necessity. For the Japanese who charged Henderson Field that night, courage had been absolute, belief unshakable, and sacrifice unquestioned. Their valor, though misdirected by an empire in decline, remained undeniable. The jungle that once swallowed their voices grew silent in the years that followed, its soil enriched by the remnants of struggle and rain. Graves marked only by bamboo crosses slowly disappeared into the green, leaving memory as their final witness. Among the Marines who survived, stories passed quietly through generations, of mud that clung like regret, of smoke that smelled of metal and rain, and of comrades whose laughter vanished into the dark. Many would return home to peaceful towns and unremarkable lives, yet each carried fragments of that night hidden behind calm eyes and unspoken pride. Their victory was not celebrated with banners, but remembered in silence, each sunrise reminding them of those who never saw another dawn. When historians spoke of Guadalcanal, they cited strategies, timelines, and weaponry. Yet the true legacy lived between those facts, the human pulse beneath the machinery. In the rain-soaked trenches of Henderson Field, invention and mortality had embraced, and in that union, the world glimpsed both the brilliance and the tragedy of progress.